The valet barely glanced my way as I handed over my keys. Maybe it was my beat-up Honda, or perhaps just the way I clutched my wedding invitation like it was made of glass. Either way, I didn't belong. Not here. Not today. The entrance to the Belleview Hotel's grand ballroom sparkled with twinkling lights, and guests floated past me in designer suits and flowing gowns. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stood for a moment at the edge of it all, watching a woman with diamond earrings adjust her husband's bow tie. My own dress was simple, a pale blue sundress I'd splurged on from a department store sale rack. I'd spent weeks agonizing over what to wear to my sister's wedding. The invitation had arrived unexpectedly 3 months ago, addressed only to me, not my husband Tyler. "You look lost," a server said, offering me a flute of champagne from his tray. "No, I'm fine," I replied, my voice smaller than intended. "I'm Eliza Wright. My sister's the bride." He nodded politely and moved on. I took a sip of the champagne, letting the bubbles calm my nerves as I stepped through the doorway into the reception. The first thing I noticed was the cake. 6 tiers of white fondant with cascading sugar flowers. That must have cost more than my entire wedding 5 years ago. The second thing I noticed was my sister Cassandra, standing beside it in my wedding dress. Not a replica. Not something similar. My actual wedding dress. The one with the delicate lace sleeves and pearl buttons down the back. The one I'd preserved in a special box and stored in my parents' attic because our apartment was too small. The one I'd shown her photos of just last month when she'd asked what my own wedding had been like. I froze, champagne halfway to my lips. Cassandra hadn't seen me yet. She was laughing, head thrown back, surrounded by admirers. My parents stood nearby, beaming with pride. They hadn't noticed me either. That's when I saw him. Tyler. My husband. Standing beside Cassandra in a tuxedo I'd never seen before, his hand resting on the small of her back, wearing a wedding band that matched the one on her finger. The champagne flute slipped from my fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Heads turned. Conversations paused. And finally, Cassandra looked up, her eyes meeting mine across the room. For just a second, surprise flickered across her face. Then her practiced smile returned, slightly tighter at the edges. "Eliza," she called out, waving as if this was all perfectly normal. "You made it." I couldn't move, couldn't speak, because 2 hours ago I had signed divorce papers in a courthouse across town. 2 hours ago, Tyler had become my ex-husband. And apparently, in those same 2 hours, he had become my sister's husband. A server rushed to clean up the broken glass at my feet, apologizing as if it had been his fault. I mumbled something in response, still staring at the impossibility before me. My mother finally spotted me and hurried over, her expression a mix of surprise and something that looked disturbingly like guilt. "Eliza, darling," she said, air-kissing my cheek. "We weren't sure you'd come." "Clearly," I managed to say. "Since no one told me my sister was marrying my husband." "Ex-husband?" she corrected quietly, squeezing my arm a little too tightly. "And lower your voice, please. The Prescotts are here." The Prescotts. Of course they were. My parents had been trying to impress the Prescott family since before I was born. Old money, older connections. Cassandra had always been better at charming them than I had. "When?" I asked, the single word heavy with questions. My mother glanced around nervously. "Let's not do this here. Maybe you should go home and rest. We can talk tomorrow." "When?" I repeated, louder this time. She sighed. "They've been seeing each other for a while. You and Tyler were separated for months, Eliza. These things happen." Separated for months. It was technically true. We'd been living apart while trying to save our marriage, or so I thought. Weekly counseling sessions, date nights, honest conversations about what went wrong, all while he was apparently building a new life with my sister. I looked past my mother to where Cassandra was now approaching, Tyler trailing behind her. My sister, wearing my dress. My husband, wearing a stranger's smile. Surprise, Cassandra said when she reached us, her voice lilting with false cheer. I was going to tell you, but then I thought, why not make it a grand reveal? My dress, I said flatly. You're wearing my wedding dress. She smoothed her hands over the familiar fabric. Mom said you wouldn't mind. It was just sitting in storage, and it fit perfectly with only minor alterations. Why let it go to waste? Before I could respond, Tyler stepped forward. Eliza, we didn't plan for things to happen this way. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Which part? I asked. The part where you dated my sister while we were in marriage counseling? Or the part where you married her 2 hours after our divorce was finalized? A few nearby guests turned to stare. My mother's grip on my arm tightened painfully. You're making a scene, she hissed. I'm making a scene? I laughed, the sound sharp and unfamiliar even to my own ears. I just walked into my sister's wedding to discover she's wearing my dress and marrying my husband. I think I'm entitled to a scene. Tyler at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Eliza, please, let's talk privately. Now you want privacy? That's rich. I stepped back, breaking free of my mother's grip. You know what? Enjoy your wedding. I hope you'll be very happy together. I turned to leave, but Cassandra caught my wrist. Don't be so dramatic. It's not like you two were happy anyway. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Because we had been happy once, and we'd been working toward happy again. Or at least I thought we had. Let go of me, I said quietly. She did, but not before leaning in close. He was never really yours to begin with. I just let you borrow him for a while. I walked out of the ballroom without looking back, past the curious stares and whispered conversations. The valet seemed surprised to see me leaving so soon, but brought my car around without comment. I sat behind the wheel for a long moment, hands shaking too badly to insert the key. A text message lit up my phone screen. My father, please don't tell anyone about this. The Prescotts are important clients. Not, I'm sorry. Not, are you okay? Just concern about appearances. About clients. I turned off my phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. 5 years ago, when Tyler proposed, I'd called Cassandra first. She was studying abroad in Paris, and I'd calculated the time difference wrong, waking her at 3 a.m. She'd squealed with excitement anyway, demanding details about the ring, the proposal, everything. She'd flown home to be my maid of honor, had helped me choose that very dress, had whispered, I'm so happy for you, with tears in her eyes as she adjusted my veil. Now I knew why she'd cried. I started the car and pulled away from the Belleview Hotel, away from the glittering lights and picture-perfect celebration. Away from the family that had apparently never really been mine. I drove aimlessly for a while, replaying moments in my mind, looking for signs I'd missed. The way Tyler had started working late more often. The mysterious weekend conferences. Cassandra's sudden interest in my marriage problems, offering to be a sympathetic ear. My parents encouraging our separation. Just to gain perspective, they'd said. They'd all been playing me for a fool, and I'd been too trusting to see it. I ended up at Brighton Beach, a place Tyler and I used to visit when we were first dating. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I kicked off my shoes and walked along the shoreline, letting the cold water wash over my feet. 3 months ago, during one of our counseling sessions, Tyler had said he still loved me but felt like something was missing. I'd thought he meant passion, spontaneity, the spark that had faded over years of comfortable routine. I'd tried so hard to rekindle that spark, planning surprise dates, sending flirty texts, suggesting new things to try together, all while he was falling in love with my sister. My phone buzzed in my purse. I turned it back on without thinking, a message from an unknown number. I opened it to find a photo of Cassandra and Tyler cutting their wedding cake, her head thrown back in laughter, him gazing at her adoringly. The caption read, "Thought you might want a souvenir. M. Melissa. My cousin. Always stirring drama. always taking Cassandra's side. I deleted the message and blocked the number. Then I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. James Harrington. My boss's son, an attorney who specialized in family law. We'd had lunch together a few times, professional conversations that occasionally veered into friendly territory. He'd given me his personal number, just in case. At the time, I'd thought he was flirting. Now I was grateful for the connection. I pressed call before I could lose my nerve. Eliza? He sounded surprised. Everything okay? Not really, I said, watching the waves crash against the shore. I need legal advice. And possibly a drink. I can offer both. Where are you? I told him, and he promised to be there in 20 minutes. After we hung up, I sat on the sand and hugged my knees to my chest. The beach was nearly empty now, just a few couples walking hand in hand in the distance. I'd come here with Tyler the night he proposed. We'd written our names in the sand and watched as the tides slowly erased them. Nature's way of teaching impermanence. James arrived as promised, carrying 2 coffee cups and a leather briefcase. He'd changed from his usual suit into jeans and a casual button-down, but the briefcase suggested he'd taken my request for legal advice seriously. Hot chocolate? He said, handing me one of the cups. With cinnamon. You mentioned once it's your comfort drink. I was touched he'd remembered. Thank you. He sat beside me on the sand, not seeming to care about his jeans. Want to tell me what happened? So I did. Every humiliating detail. The wedding invitation. The dress. The 2-hour timeline between my divorce and their marriage. Cassandra's whispered claim. My parents' complicity. With each word, my voice grew stronger, my thoughts clearer. James listened without interrupting, his expression darkening as the story unfolded. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, staring out at the ocean. Well, he finally said, that's about the most messed up thing I've ever heard. A laugh escaped me, the first genuine one all day. Yeah, pretty much. Legally, there are some interesting questions here, he continued, switching into professional mode. The timing is suspicious, to say the least. And if your parents gave away your preserved wedding dress without permission, that's technically theft of personal property. I don't care about the dress, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. I did care. It represented memories, promises, a future I'd once believed in. What do you care about? James asked gently. I thought about it. The truth, and making sure they don't get away with treating me like this. He nodded, opening his briefcase and pulling out a legal pad. Then let's start with what we know and what we can prove. As the sun disappeared completely and stars began to appear overhead, James and I mapped out a strategy. He asked questions I hadn't considered, about joint assets Tyler and I had owned, about communications between us during our separation, about specific dates and timelines. Wait, I said, remembering something. The marriage counselor, Dr. Patel. She has notes from all our sessions. Tyler told her he was committed to working on our marriage. That was just 3 weeks ago. James wrote it down. Good. That could be useful if he claimed your marriage was over long before the divorce. And I have texts, I added, scrolling through my phone. From Tyler, from Cassandra, messages about trying to fix things, about still loving me. Save everything, James advised. Forward them to me, and I'll create backups. Don't delete anything, even if it seems unimportant. By the time we finished, it was nearly midnight. My hot chocolate had gone cold, and the temperature had dropped enough to make me shiver in my thin dress. Here, James said, noticing, and handed me his jacket. It was warm from his body heat and smelled faintly of cologne. Thanks. I slipped it on, suddenly aware of how long we'd been sitting here, how easy it had been to talk to him. For everything, I should let you get home. I'm in no rush, he said, unless you want to be alone. I considered the empty apartment waiting for me. The wedding photo I still hadn't taken down from the bedside table. The closet half empty since Tyler had moved his things out. Actually, I could use a friend right now. He smiled. Then you've got one. We walked along the shoreline, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his childhood dream of becoming a marine biologist, before the family law firm pulled him in a different direction. I told him about the photography hobby I'd abandoned when life got too busy. Simple, normal conversations that reminded me there was a world beyond today's betrayal. When he finally drove me home, I felt steadier than I had in months. We'd made a plan, I had evidence. And for the first time since walking into that ballroom, I felt like I might eventually be okay. "I'll call you tomorrow," James promised as I got out of his car. "Try to get some sleep." I nodded, though sleep seemed unlikely. "Thank you again." Inside my apartment, I went straight to the bedroom and took down the wedding photo, placing it face down in a drawer. Then I changed into comfortable clothes and curled up on the couch with my laptop. I started with my bank accounts. Joint accounts I'd forgotten to close after the separation. Credit cards Tyler still had access to as an authorized user. One by one, I removed his name, changed passwords, set up alerts for unusual activity. Financial boundaries were just the beginning, but they were something concrete I could control right now. Next, I logged into my email and began searching for anything related to Tyler, to Cassandra, to my parents. Sorting through years of communications, looking for patterns I'd missed. The timestamps told a story I hadn't been ready to see before. Cassandra's increasingly frequent messages whenever Tyler and I hit a rough patch. My mother's subtle criticisms of my marriage choices. My father's repeated invitations for Tyler to join him for golf. Invitations that never extended to me. They'd been drawing him into their orbit, away from mine, for longer than I'd realized. Around 3 a.m., I found something that made my blood run cold. An email from 6 months ago, when Tyler and I were still living together, still planning our future. It was from my mother to Cassandra, accidentally copied to my rarely used family email account. Tyler mentioned he's thinking about that job in Boston. Perfect timing with the Prescott merger. You should visit next month. Plant the seed. The job in Boston. The one Tyler had ultimately turned down because he said he couldn't bear to uproot me from my career, my friends. I'd been so touched by his sacrifice, never suspecting there was another plan in motion. I forwarded the email to James with a single question mark, then continued digging. By sunrise, I had a folder full of evidence, small pieces that individually seemed innocent enough, but together painted a clear picture of manipulation and betrayal. My phone rang just after 7 a.m. I expected it to be James, but the screen showed my father's name instead. "Eliza," he said when I answered, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We need to talk about your behavior yesterday." "My behavior?" I repeated, incredulous. "You embarrassed this family in front of important people. The Prescotts were asking questions all night. Do you have any idea how that affects your mother and me?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "That's what you're worried about? Your reputation? Not the fact that your daughters' lives have been destroyed? Don't be melodramatic. Your marriage was already over." "Because you helped end it," I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. "You and Mom. You pushed for our separation. You encouraged Tyler to take that apartment across town instead of staying with friends. You orchestrated all of this." His silence was confirmation enough. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. "What did I ever do to deserve this?" He sighed heavily. "It wasn't personal, Eliza. The Prescotts wanted to merge their company with ours, but only if we could offer them family connections. Cassandra and Tyler make a better match for what we needed. He has the right background, the right education, and Cassandra knows how to play the game." "The game?" I repeated slowly. "My marriage was a game to you? Business is always a game. Your mother and I taught you that from the beginning. But you never wanted to learn. Always with your head in the clouds, talking about love and fulfillment instead of security and connections." I thought about my childhood, about the lessons they'd tried to teach me, about Cassandra absorbing those lessons while I'd rejected them, about the praise she'd received for her strategic friendships while I was criticized for choosing friends based on genuine connection. They'd been grooming her from the start. And in their eyes, I'd always been the failure. "I see," I said finally. "Well, I hope the merger was worth it. It will secure the family's future for generations," he replied, as if that justified everything. "Not my future. And not my family. Not anymore." I hung up before he could respond and blocked his number. Then I did the same for my mother, Cassandra, and Tyler. One by one, cutting the ties that had been strangling me for years without my knowledge. My phone rang again almost immediately. James this time. "I got your email," he said without preamble. "This changes things. If they were deliberately interfering in your marriage for business purposes, we might have grounds for a civil suit." Against my own family? The idea seemed both horrifying and oddly satisfying. "Against people who hurt you," he corrected gently. "Family is supposed to protect you, not use you as a pawn in their business deals." He was right, of course. And yet the thought of facing them in court, of making this mess even more public than it already was, made my stomach churn. "I need time to think," I said finally. "Take all the time you need. But don't delete anything else you find. And Eliza? Remember, you did nothing wrong here." After we hung up, I sat staring at my laptop screen, at the evidence I'd collected through the night, at the truth I'd uncovered about the people who were supposed to love me most. 5 years ago, I'd married Tyler, believing in forever. Yesterday, I'd signed divorce papers, believing it was mutual, amicable. The sad but respectful end to a relationship that had simply run its course. Today, I knew better. Today, I knew I'd been betrayed not just by my husband, but by my entire family. But today, I also knew I wasn't alone. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something stirring inside me that wasn't grief or shock or rage. It was strength. It was clarity. It was the first fragile seed of something that might, eventually, become freedom. I closed my laptop, walked to the window, and opened the blinds. Sunlight streamed in, warming my face. Outside, the city was coming alive. People rushing to work, children heading to school, lives continuing as they always did. My life would continue too. Different than I'd planned, but mine to shape now. Without their manipulation. Without their lies. Without the weight of expectations I'd never wanted to carry. I picked up my phone and texted James. "I'm ready to fight back." His response came immediately. "I'll be right beside you." I believed him. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I also believed in myself. James arrived at my apartment promptly at 9 the next morning, laptop under one arm and a bag of fresh bagels in the other. His casual efficiency was comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside me. "I hope you like everything," he said, setting the bag on my kitchen counter. "I wasn't sure what you preferred." "At this point, I'm running on coffee in spite," I admitted, reaching for the largest cup in my cabinet. "But food is probably smart." He smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "How are you holding up?" I considered lying, saying I was fine. My default response after years of hiding my feelings from a family that viewed emotions as weaknesses. Instead, I told the truth. "I haven't slept. I'm cycling between wanting to scream and wanting to disappear. And I keep checking social media even though I know it's only going to make things worse." "That's understandable," James said, pulling out his laptop. "But let's channel some of that energy into action. I've been researching all morning, and I think we have several viable options." While James sat up at my dining table, I grabbed plates for the bagels and refilled my coffee. The normalcy of the moment, sharing breakfast, preparing for the day, felt surreal after yesterday's revelation. "So, James began once we were settled. Based on what you've shared and the evidence you've collected, I see 3 potential approaches." He outlined each option methodically. First, a civil suit against my parents and sister for intentional interference with my marriage. Challenging, but possible with the evidence we had. Second, a financial claim against Tyler for fraud during our divorce proceedings, given that he'd clearly been planning his next marriage while negotiating ours. Third, a more personal approach focused on exposing the truth to those whose opinions my family valued most. "The Prescotts," I murmured, thinking of my father's panicked text. "Their approval means everything to my parents." James nodded. "Exactly. Sometimes social consequences can be more effective than legal ones, especially for people obsessed with their reputation." "What would that look like?" I asked, oddly calm now that concrete options were taking shape. That depends on what you want the outcome to be, James replied. Do you want them punished? Do you want financial compensation? Or do you just want the truth acknowledged? I considered his question carefully, spreading cream cheese on a bagel I wasn't sure I could eat. What did I want? Revenge seemed too simple, too fleeting. Money felt hollow. I had my job, my savings, enough to rebuild on my own. And acknowledgement? From people who had shown me exactly how little they valued truth? I want my life back, I said finally. Not my marriage, that was clearly built on lies, but my sense of self. My belief in my own judgment. They didn't just take Tyler from me. They made me doubt everything I thought I knew. James reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. Then that's what we'll fight for. We spent the next several hours building a timeline, cross-referencing emails and text messages, creating a clear picture of the conspiracy that had unfolded behind my back. The more we uncovered, the more obvious the pattern became. My mother introducing Tyler to Cassandra at family gatherings I couldn't attend due to work commitments. My father arranging golf outings and business lunches that gradually incorporated Tyler into their professional circle. Cassandra's sudden interest in the hobbies and causes Tyler cared about. And all while encouraging me to give him space during our separation, to focus on myself instead of fighting for my marriage. Look at this, James said, pointing to his screen. The timeline of your counseling sessions overlaps almost perfectly with Cassandra's trips home from Paris. Every time you thought you were making progress with Tyler, she was in town. I leaned closer, scanning the dates. And here, the weekend Tyler canceled our anniversary trip because of work emergencies? My mother posted photos from their lake house. He's in the background of this one. The betrayal had been so carefully orchestrated, so meticulously planned, that it made my head spin. How had I missed the signs? How had I been so completely fooled by the people who knew me best? Stop, James said gently, as if reading my thoughts. This isn't a failure of your perception. This was deliberate deception by people you had every reason to trust. I nodded, not entirely convinced, but grateful for his perspective. So what's our next step? Before James could answer, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I almost declined it, but something made me answer. Eliza, right? A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Yes, speaking. This is Margaret Prescott. I believe we met briefly at your sister's wedding yesterday. My heart skipped. Margaret Prescott, the matriarch of the Prescott family, the very people my parents had sacrificed my marriage to impress. Mrs. Prescott, I managed to say, motioning frantically for James to listen. Yes, I remember. I'm calling because something about that event didn't sit right with me, and I've learned to trust my instincts in such matters. Would you be available for tea this afternoon? My home, not the office. This is a personal matter. I looked at James, who nodded encouragingly. I could be there at 3, I said. Perfect. I'll text you the address. She paused. And Eliza, feel free to bring any documentation you might have regarding your family's recent arrangements. I prefer clarity in all situations. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Did she just invite you to expose your family's scheme to the very people they were trying to impress? James finished. Yes, I believe she did. But how did she know? And why would she care? James closed his laptop thoughtfully. The Prescotts didn't build their empire by being easily manipulated. They've survived 3 generations of business because they're excellent judges of character. Or maybe she just recognizes a good scandal when she sees one, I said, suddenly nervous about what I'd agreed to. Either way, James replied, this could be exactly the opportunity we need. The Prescott mansion was everything I expected, grand without being ostentatious, historic without feeling dated. A uniformed butler showed me into a sun-filled conservatory where Margaret Prescott sat waiting, a silver tea service arranged on the table before her. She was exactly as I remembered from the wedding. Elegant, composed, with shrewd eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about me as I approached. Eliza, thank you for coming on such short notice, she said, gesturing to the chair opposite hers. Tea? Thank you, I replied, taking the delicate cup she offered. Up close, I could see the fine lines around her eyes, the subtle evidence of a life fully lived. She had to be in her 70s, but her posture and presence suggested someone half that age. I'll be direct, she said once I was settled. I've known your parents for 30 years. I've watched them climb socially and professionally with a determination that I've always found somewhat distasteful. I nearly choked on my tea. This was not the beginning I'd expected. My husband finds their ambition amusing, she continued. I find it transparent. But business is business, and they've been useful partners over the years. Until now, I ventured. A small smile touched her lips. Until they decided to involve me in family matters that cross ethical boundaries. I don't appreciate being used as justification for cruelty, Eliza. I'm not sure I understand. She set down her cup with a decisive click. Your father approached my husband 6 months ago with a proposal. A merger between our companies, facilitated by a personal connection. Specifically, a marriage between your sister and a young man with the right credentials and family background. Your husband. Ex-husband, I corrected automatically, then winced at how petty it sounded. Indeed. Though the timing of that transition is precisely what concerns me. She leaned forward slightly. Did you bring the documentation I mentioned? I nodded, reaching for the folder James and I had prepared. It's all here. Emails, text messages, dates, everything we could find that shows how they manipulated the situation. Margaret took the folder and opened it, scanning the contents with practiced efficiency. Her expression remained neutral, but I noticed her grip tightening slightly on the pages as she read. This is remarkably thorough, she said finally, closing the folder. And remarkably disturbing. Using a marriage as a business transaction isn't unheard of in certain circles, but dismantling an existing one for profit? She shook her head. Even my generation had higher standards. She rose and crossed to a small writing desk in the corner, returning with a leather portfolio of her own. Your parents believe the merger depends on my husband's approval of their new son-in-law. What they don't realize is that I have always had the final say in our family's business dealings. She slid a document across the table toward me. It was a letter, printed on Prescott Industries letterhead, formally rejecting the proposed merger with my parents' company. You're canceling the deal? I asked, scanning the letter in disbelief. I never approved it in the first place, she replied calmly. This was drafted the day after your father's initial proposal. I simply never sent it, as I wanted to see how far they would go. I looked up from the letter, studying her face. This was a test? You let them destroy my marriage as some kind of ethical assessment? For the first time, Margaret Prescott looked uncomfortable. No. I had no idea they would target an existing marriage. I assumed they were simply pushing your sister toward an advantageous match, which, while old-fashioned, isn't inherently harmful. By the time I realized the full scope, events were already in motion. She sighed, suddenly looking every one of her years. I should have intervened sooner. For that, I apologize. Her apology, sincere as it seemed, did little to ease the ache in my chest. So what happens now? You reject the merger, my parents lose their business opportunity, and I'm still left with the wreckage. That, Margaret said, straightening her shoulders, is entirely up to you. The letter will be delivered tomorrow, regardless. But what you do with the information I've shared, and what I do with what you've shared, depends on what justice looks like to you. I thought about James's question from earlier. What did I really want? Punishment? Compensation? Acknowledgement? I want them to face consequences, I said slowly. Real ones, not just financial disappointment. I want them to understand what they did to me. Margaret nodded, as if she'd expected nothing less. Then perhaps we should discuss how to ensure that happens. By the time I left the Prescott mansion 2 hours later, we had a plan, not just for consequences, but for my future. A future that suddenly seemed brighter than it had in months. I called James from the car, my hands shaking with a mixture of excitement and lingering disbelief. You're not going to believe what just happened, I told him, recounting the entire conversation with Margaret Prescott. So she's not only canceling the merger but offering you a position at their company? James sounded impressed. That's quite a turn of events. She said she recognizes talent and integrity when she sees it, and both are rare enough to be worth investing in. I still couldn't quite believe it myself. The position starts in 3 months. Enough time to wrap up my current projects and deal with everything else, including your family's reaction when they find out, James added, voicing the concern I'd been avoiding. Yes. I took a deep breath. Margaret suggested I wait until after the rejection letter is delivered. Let them panic a bit before they realize I had anything to do with it. Sounds like she has a bit of a vindictive streak. She called it strategic timing, I replied, smiling despite myself. But yes, I think she's enjoying this more than she's willing to admit. When I got home, I found 3 missed calls from Cassandra and a text from my mother asking if I was still being dramatic or ready to act like an adult. I ignored both, focusing instead on the steps James and I had mapped out earlier. First, financial protection, changing accounts, passwords, securing my credit. Second, information gathering, which we'd done more thoroughly than I'd thought possible. Third, strategic disclosure, which was now in progress with Margaret Prescott's help. The final step was the hardest, rebuilding, not just my external life, but my internal sense of trust. How could I ever believe in anyone again after this level of betrayal? As if sensing my spiraling thoughts, James texted, "Dinner tonight? My treat. No legal talk allowed." I hesitated only briefly before replying, yes, I could use a break from all this. He suggested a small Italian place in a neighborhood I rarely visited, far from anywhere my family might be. It was perfect. Warm, unpretentious, with red checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in Chianti bottles. The kind of place that felt like a hug. I come here whenever I win a difficult case, James explained as we were seated. Or when I lose one that matters. The food has healing properties. I laughed, genuinely, for what felt like the first time in ages. I could use some of that right now. We ordered wine and pasta, and true to his promise, James steered our conversation away from my family drama. Instead, he asked about my photography, my forgotten passion. I found myself talking animatedly about light and composition, about the camera I'd saved for but rarely used anymore. "Why did you stop?" he asked, refilling my wine glass. I considered the question, realizing I'd never really examined the answer. Life got busy. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But honestly, I think I stopped seeing beauty in everyday things. Everything became routine, predictable. And now? Now everything's chaos, I admitted, but at least it's not predictable. He smiled, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes chaos is where creativity thrives. By the time we finished dinner, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not healed. That would take far longer, but as if healing might actually be possible. James walked me to my door, maintaining a respectful distance that I found both disappointing and reassuring. He wasn't pushing, wasn't taking advantage of my vulnerability. "Thank you," I said as we reached my apartment. "For everything. The legal help, the dinner, just being there. That's what friends do," he replied simply. "And I'd like to think we're becoming friends, Eliza." "We are," I confirmed, surprising myself with how true it felt. In the midst of losing my family, I was finding connections I hadn't expected. After he left, I pulled out my old camera from the closet shelf where it had been gathering dust. The battery was dead, but I found the charger and plugged it in. A small act of hope, of belief in a future where I might see beauty again. My phone rang just as I was getting ready for bed. Tyler's number. I stared at it, heart pounding before finally answering. "What do you want?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Eliza, please," he said, sounding exhausted. "Can we talk? Cassandra told me you're spreading rumors about us to her clients." "Her clients?" I repeated, confused. "I haven't spoken to anyone except—" I stopped, understanding dawning. "The Prescotts. They're not her clients, Tyler. They're my parents' business targets. And I didn't spread rumors. I shared facts." He sighed heavily. "Look, I know you're hurt, but destroying this deal won't change anything between us. This isn't about us, I replied, surprising myself with how true that felt. This is about consequences. You all made choices. Now you get to live with them. That's not fair, he protested. You don't understand what's at stake. I understand perfectly. You chose business over honesty, status over loyalty, my sister over me. Those were your choices, Tyler. The consequences are just math. After I hung up, I expected to feel angry or vindicated. Instead, I felt oddly calm. For months, years maybe, I'd been trying to understand what was wrong with my marriage, what I could have done differently. Now I knew. Nothing. The problem had never been me. It had been them. All of them. Playing a game I didn't even know I was part of. The next morning, James called early. The Prescott letter was delivered an hour ago, he said without preamble. Your father's office has been trying to reach Margaret Prescott nonstop since then. And? Her assistant is telling them she's unavailable indefinitely. Your mother has called the house 3 times. They've been informed Mrs. Prescott is not accepting calls from their family. A small, petty part of me felt satisfaction at their panic. The larger part just felt sad for what could have been, for the family I'd thought I had. What about Cassandra and Tyler? I asked. Nothing yet, James replied. But it's only a matter of time before your parents drag them into it. He was right. By mid-afternoon, Cassandra was at my door, pounding with enough force to concern my neighbors. I opened it calmly, standing firmly in the doorway to block her entry. Yes? What did you do? She demanded, her perfect composure from the wedding replaced by wild-eyed panic. Dad's deal is falling apart because of you. No, I corrected her. Dad's deal is falling apart because of Dad. And you. And Tyler. And Mom. All of you, conspiring together thinking no one would notice or care. It wasn't personal, she insisted, echoing our father's words from yesterday. It was business. It was my life, I replied. My marriage. My trust. There's nothing more personal than that. She ran a hand through her hair. My wedding dress apparently returned to storage, replaced by designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent. You always were too sensitive, too caught up in feelings instead of facts. This is why Mom and Dad chose me, you know. Because I understand what matters. Her words should have hurt, but instead, they clarified something I'd been struggling to articulate. You're right, we value different things. I value honesty, loyalty, genuine connection. You value status, appearance, what other people think. So yes, they chose you, and I'm finally choosing myself. I started to close the door, but she blocked it with her foot. The Prescotts were supposed to fund Tyler's new position. Without that money, the job offer might be rescinded. Did you think about that? About what this means for our future? I thought about exactly that, I said quietly. About your future built on the ruins of mine. And I decided it wasn't my responsibility to protect it. This time when I pushed the door closed, she didn't stop me. I listened to her heels clicking angrily down the hallway, waited until I heard the elevator doors open and close, then leaned against the wall and exhaled slowly. One by one, they were showing their true colors. One by one, they were confirming what I'd begun to suspect. This family had never been what I thought it was, what I'd wanted it to be. And for the first time, I was starting to believe that might be okay. That I might be okay, eventually, without them. I picked up my charged camera and walked to the window. Outside, life continued. People walking dogs, children playing, couples holding hands. I raised the viewfinder to my eye, adjusting the focus until a young girl blowing bubbles came into perfect clarity. I pressed the shutter, capturing a moment of pure joy. Click. A small act of seeing beauty again. Click. A small act of reclaiming my life. Click. A small step toward becoming the person I was meant to be all along. 3 days after the Prescott letter was delivered, my parents called an emergency family meeting. The formal invitation arrived by courier, heavy cream cardstock embossed with our family crest, as if we were royalty instead of just wealthy people with good connections. I almost laughed at the theatrics, but the message was clear. This was serious business. I showed the invitation to James over lunch at a small cafe near my apartment. He'd become a daily presence in my life, checking in each morning, offering legal updates and friendly encouragement in equal measure. "Are you gonna go?" he asked, studying the elaborate calligraphy. "I haven't decided." I stirred my coffee absently. Part of me wants to see them squirm. Another part never wants to see any of them again. "What does the rest of you want?" I considered his question. Closure, maybe. A chance to say what needs to be said, on my terms this time. James nodded thoughtfully. "Then go. But go prepared." Preparation meant reviewing our evidence once more, rehearsing what I would and wouldn't say, and choosing an outfit that made me feel powerful. A sleek black dress I'd bought years ago, but rarely had occasion to wear, paired with the pearl earrings that had been my grandmother's. She'd been the only member of the family who'd ever truly seen me, who'd encouraged my photography and quiet independence. "You're more like me than any of them," she'd told me once, shortly before she died. "Don't let them change that about you." I hadn't understood what she meant then. I was beginning to now. James offered to drive me to my parents' house, moral support without intrusion. "I'll wait in the car," he said as we pulled up to the imposing stone mansion where I'd grown up. "Text if you need anything, or if you want to make a dramatic exit." I smiled gratefully. "I'll try to keep the drama to a minimum. After what they've put you through, you're entitled to a little drama." The family butler, Simmons, who'd known me since childhood, opened the door with his usual impassive expression. "Miss Eliza, the family is gathered in the study." "Thank you, Simmons." I handed him my light jacket, noticing how he avoided meeting my eyes. "Is everything all right?" A flicker of emotion crossed his professional mask. "It's good to see you, miss. The house hasn't been the same." Before I could respond to this unexpected sentiment, my mother's voice called from down the hallway. "Eliza? Is that you? Come in. We're waiting." The study was my father's domain. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, the subtle scent of expensive cigars. He sat behind his massive desk, while my mother perched on the edge of a nearby armchair. Cassandra and Tyler stood by the fireplace, a united front. All eyes turned to me as I entered. "You're late," my father said by way of greeting. I checked my watch pointedly. "Actually, I'm 5 minutes early, but I appreciate the warm welcome." My mother sighed dramatically. "Let's not start with hostility, please. We have serious matters to discuss." "Yes, we do." I remained standing, declining the chair my father gestured toward. Standing gave me a psychological advantage I wasn't willing to surrender. "I assume this is about the Prescott merger?" "You know damn well it is," my father snapped, his composed facade already cracking. 30 years of relationship building, destroyed overnight. And somehow, you're involved." "Involved?" I repeated, arching an eyebrow. "That's an interesting choice of words. I'd say I was involved the moment you decided to use my marriage as collateral in a business deal." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Cassandra's perfectly manicured hand tightened on his arm. "That's ridiculous," my mother interjected. "Your marriage was already failing. We simply helped Tyler find a more suitable path forward." "A more suitable path?" The calm in my voice surprised even me. "You mean a path that benefited the family business, a path that positioned him with Cassandra instead of me." "Tyler was always meant for greater things," my father said dismissively. "Your sister understands the family legacy in ways you never have." I looked at Tyler, really looked at him for the first time since entering the room. The man I'd loved, built a life with, planned a future with. He couldn't meet my gaze. "Is that how you see it, Tyler?" I asked quietly. "Were you meant for greater things than our marriage?" He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Eliza, you have to understand the opportunities your family could provide." "Our family," Cassandra corrected quickly, squeezing his arm. "You're part of our family now." The irony wasn't lost on me. "Yes, our family. The one that plots and schemes and uses people like game pieces. Welcome to it, Tyler. I hope the benefits outweigh the cost to your integrity." My father slammed his hand on the desk. "Enough! We didn't call this meeting to rehash your feelings. We called it because the Prescotts have not only rejected our merger proposal, but blacklisted our company from future partnerships. Margaret Prescott herself has informed several key industry leaders that we're, quote, ethically compromised. So that was Margaret's move. Clever and devastating. Exactly what we'd discussed that afternoon over tea. That's unfortunate, I said mildly. For you. For all of us, my mother corrected. This affects the entire family's standing. I'm no longer part of this family, I reminded her. You made that abundantly clear when you excluded me from my own nephew's life, gave away my wedding dress, and orchestrated the destruction of my marriage. Always so dramatic, Cassandra muttered. I turned to her, letting my carefully constructed calm slip just slightly. Stealing my husband wasn't enough for you? You had to take my dress too? Was that your idea, or did Mother suggest it as a particularly twisted form of symbolism? For the first time, Cassandra looked uncomfortable. It was just a dress. It was my dress, my memories, my life that you decided was less valuable than yours. I shook my head. But that's always been the dynamic, hasn't it? Eliza gives, Cassandra takes. Eliza sacrifices, Cassandra benefits. You're being unfair, my mother protested. We've always supported you. Have you? When? When you criticized my career choices. When you dismissed my photography as a cute hobby. When you told me Tyler was settling by marrying me. The memories surfaced faster than I could contain them. Or was it when you helped him plan his wedding to my sister while I was still trying to save our marriage? My father stood abruptly. This isn't getting us anywhere. The point is, the Prescotts were perfectly amenable until suddenly they weren't. And the timing coincides with your little scene at the wedding. It wasn't a scene, I corrected. It was a revelation. And yes, I spoke with Margaret Prescott afterward. We had a lovely tea at her home. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's face paled. My father slowly sank back into his chair. You what? Cassandra finally managed. Margaret Prescott invited me to tea. We discussed many things, including the real reason behind your hasty wedding. I kept my voice conversational, as if sharing neighborhood gossip. She was particularly interested in the timeline, the marriage counseling sessions Tyler attended with me while dating you, the loans taken out in my name to fund your European vacations, the family gatherings I was excluded from, where business connections were being cultivated. Tyler looked stricken. Eliza, you didn't share evidence of fraud, manipulation, and ethical violations with one of the most influential women in the business world? I finished for him. I absolutely did, just as I shared it with my attorney, who is currently parked outside in case any of you decide this conversation should become uncomfortable. My father's face flushed deep red. You've betrayed this family. No, I replied calmly. This family betrayed me. I simply refused to remain silent about it. What do you want? My mother asked, her voice tight with controlled panic. Money? A public apology? What will it take to fix this? I almost laughed at the absurdity of her question. As if this was a problem to be solved with the right combination of resources. Like everything else in their world. I don't want anything from you, I said honestly. Not anymore. I came today to tell you that I'm done. With the lies, the manipulation, all of it. I'm starting a new chapter, and none of you are in it. Don't be ridiculous, my father scoffed. You can't just walk away from your family. Watch me. I turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Tyler. By the way, I've accepted a position with Prescott Industries. I start in 3 months. Margaret said to tell you they've reconsidered your application for the director role. Something about questionable judgment and loyalty issues. The color drained from Tyler's face. Cassandra's grip on his arm tightened to what must have been a painful degree. You'd work for our competitors? My father demanded, outrage raising his voice to a near shout. After everything we've done for you? After everything you've done to me, I corrected. And yes, I would. I am. Margaret Prescott values integrity and talent. Two things this family never appreciated in me. I walked to the door, feeling lighter with each step. Don't contact me again. Any of you. My lawyer will handle any necessary communications going forward. Eliza, wait, my mother called, desperation finally cracking her perfect society voice. You can't just leave like this. We're your family. I paused in the doorway, turning to look at them one last time. These strangers who shared my blood but had never shared my heart. Family doesn't use each other, I said quietly. Family doesn't manipulate and lie and steal. Family protects each other. You failed at the most basic requirement of being a family. So no, you're not my family anymore. You're just people I used to know. With that, I walked out, past the study, through the grand foyer, out the heavy front door that closed behind me with a satisfying thud. James was waiting in the car as promised, engine running. How did it go? He asked as I slid into the passenger seat. Better than expected, I replied, watching the mansion grow smaller in the side mirror as we drove away. I think I just emancipated myself. He smiled. Congratulations. Where to now? Anywhere but here. We ended up at the beach again. Our beach, as I'd begun to think of it. The place where I'd first reached out to James, where I'd begun to rebuild myself from the wreckage my family had left behind. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that made me wish I'd brought my camera. We walked along the shoreline, letting the gentle waves wash over our bare feet. You know, James said after a comfortable silence, most people never have the courage to do what you just did. Standing up to family, especially family like yours, takes extraordinary strength. I don't feel particularly strong, I admitted. Just clear. Like I've been looking through a foggy window for years and someone finally wiped it clean. That clarity is its own kind of strength. We stopped walking, facing the ocean as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon. The first stars were becoming visible overhead, tiny pinpricks of light in the darkening sky. I used to think belonging to my family was the most important thing, I said, more to myself than to James. That their approval, their acceptance, was what gave me value. I spent so many years trying to earn something that should have been freely given. James didn't respond immediately, giving my words the space they deserved. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Some relationships aren't meant to be earned, Eliza. They're meant to be given. Freely, completely, without conditions or calculations. I turned to look at him, this man who'd become my advocate, my confidant, possibly my friend. Is that what you believe? It's what I know, he replied simply. It's how my parents loved me. It's how I hope to love someday. The word hung between us. Love, with all its implications and possibilities. It was too soon, of course. Too soon after Tyler, after the betrayal, after everything had been turned upside down. But for the first time, I could imagine a future where love might exist again, where trust might be possible. I should get home, I said, suddenly aware of how close we were standing, how intimate this moment had become. It's been a long day. James nodded, respecting the boundary I needed. Of course. As we drove back to my apartment, I thought about what awaited me there. The empty rooms, the half-packed boxes, the beginnings of a new life I was still figuring out how to build. It should have felt lonely, frightening. Instead, it felt like possibility. Thank you, I said as James pulled up in front of my building, for everything. The legal help, the moral support, just being there through all of this. That's what friends do, he replied, echoing his words from before. But there was something different in his eyes now, something I wasn't quite ready to name. Friends, I agreed, opening the car door. I'll call you tomorrow? I'll be here. Inside my apartment, I went straight to the window, watching as James's car pulled away from the curb. Then I turned and surveyed the space that had once been mine, and Tyler's, that was now just mine. The walls I'd picked, the furniture we'd chosen together, the photographs I'd taken that he'd never quite appreciated. I picked up my camera from where I'd left it on the coffee table and scrolled through the recent images. The bubble-blowing girl, an elderly couple walking hand in hand, a flock of birds against the sunset sky. Small moments of beauty I was learning to see again. On impulse, I connected the camera to my laptop and began editing the images, adjusting light and shadow, enhancing color, cropping for maximum impact. It had been years since I'd lost myself in this process, in the meticulous craft of turning a good photograph into something meaningful. Hours passed without my noticing. When I finally looked up, it was past midnight, and my phone was blinking with notifications. 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 from Cassandra, a text from Tyler asking if we could talk privately. I deleted them all without responding. There was also an email from Margaret Prescott, sent just an hour ago despite the late hour. Eliza, I've been reviewing your portfolio again, and am increasingly impressed by your eye for detail and your unique perspective. The position we discussed is certainly yours, but I wonder if you might consider an additional role as our visual content director. The company has been lacking a cohesive aesthetic identity, and I believe your talents could be invaluable in that area. Let's discuss over lunch next week. Margaret! I stared at the screen, rereading the message twice to be sure I'd understood correctly. Not just a job, a career opportunity that would utilize my forgotten passion. A chance to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of purpose. I typed a quick response accepting the lunch invitation, then turned back to my photography project with renewed energy. By the time exhaustion finally forced me to bed, I'd created a small portfolio of new work, images that captured not just what I saw, but how I saw it. My unique perspective, as Margaret had put it. As I drifted towards sleep, I thought about perspective, how changing your viewpoint could transform your entire understanding of a situation. From inside my family, I'd seen only what they wanted me to see. From outside, the picture was clearer, if more painful. The pain was necessary, I realized. It was the price of clarity, of freedom, of becoming the person I was always meant to be but had been afraid to become. The next morning, I woke to an unexpected sound, knocking at my door, soft but persistent. I checked the peephole cautiously, half expecting to see Cassandra or my mother staging another confrontation. Instead, I found my cousin Emma, my mother's sister's daughter, who had always been the family rebel, keeping her distance from the drama and politics that defined our interactions. Emma? I opened the door in surprise. What are you doing here? She offered a hesitant smile. Can I come in? I brought breakfast. She held up a bag from my favorite bakery. A peace offering or bribe. I wasn't sure which. I stepped aside to let her enter, curious but wary. Emma and I had been close as children, but had drifted apart as adults, our lives taking different directions. She'd chosen art school over business college, travel over stability, authenticity over family approval. All choices I'd secretly admired, but hadn't had the courage to make myself. Nice place, she commented, glancing around my apartment. Very you. Thanks, I replied, still confused by her presence. Not that I'm not happy to see you, but why am I here? She set the bakery bag on my counter and turned to face me directly. I heard what happened. All of it. The wedding, the dress, the Prescott deal falling through. My mom called me in a panic, wanting me to talk some sense into you. My guard went up immediately. And that's why you're here? To convince me to forgive and forget? Emma laughed. A genuine, unrestrained sound I'd almost forgotten. God, no. I'm here to say it's about damn time someone in this family stood up to them. Oh. I felt the tension in my shoulders release slightly. So you're not here as their messenger? I'm here as your friend. She pulled 2 croissants from the bag and handed me one. And as someone who knows exactly what it feels like when that family decides you're not living up to their expectations. We settled on my couch, and Emma listened as I recounted the full story, from the wedding revelation to the confrontation at my parents' house. She didn't interrupt, didn't question or doubt, just nodded with increasing indignation. They always were masters of manipulation, she said when I finished. But this? Using your marriage as a business transaction? That's low even for them. The worst part is, I never saw it coming, I admitted. I knew they preferred Cassandra, knew they thought I'd made the wrong choices, but I never imagined they'd actively work to destroy my life. Emma's expression softened. That's because you're a good person, Eliza. You assume others have basic decency, because you do. It's not a weakness to expect better from people who claim to love you. Her words hit me with unexpected force, permission to believe in my own goodness, my own right to expect better. Something I'd been struggling to hold on to through all of this. So what now? She asked, finishing her croissant. I heard a rumor you're going to work for the Prescotts? I nodded. Margaret offered me a position. 2, actually. One in client relations, and another as visual content director. She saw my photography and thought it had potential. That's amazing! Emma's enthusiasm was contagious. Your photos always were incredible. Remember that sunset series you did at the lake house that summer? I still have the print you gave me hanging in my apartment. I'd forgotten about that, the way Emma had championed my photography when everyone else dismissed it. The way she'd insisted on framing and hanging one of my images, treating it as valuable when my own parents had called it a nice hobby. Why did we lose touch? I asked suddenly. We used to be so close. Emma's smile turned wistful. Because I was the family disappointment, and you were still trying not to be. They made it clear that associating with me too closely might tarnish your potential. That's ridiculous, I protested, though I knew it was probably true. My parents had always referred to Emma as the cautionary tale, the brilliant cousin who'd wasted her potential on frivolous pursuits like art and travel. It was their way of maintaining control, Emma said simply. Isolate the rebels, reward the compliant. Classic cult tactics, really. We were in a cult, I said slowly, the realization both absurd and illuminating. A family cult with my father as the leader and my mother as his enforcer. Emma laughed. Exactly, and now you've escaped. Welcome to the real world, cousin. It's messier, but much more interesting. We spent the rest of the morning catching up, Emma telling me about her travels, her art installations, the community of creatives she'd built around herself. People who valued her for exactly who she was, not for what she could provide or represent. You should meet them, she suggested as she prepared to leave. My friends. We have dinner every Sunday at this little Ethiopian place downtown. No pressure, no expectations, just good food and better conversation. The invitation felt like another step toward a new life, one built on genuine connections rather than obligation and performance. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. After Emma left, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. Not just the absence of pain or the clarity of anger, but actual hope for what might lie ahead. A career that valued my talents, a cousin reconnected. Friends who might become family in all the ways that mattered. And James. Whatever that might become, in its own time. I picked up my camera again, framing a shot of the light streaming through my window, casting patterns on the hardwood floor. Simple beauty in an ordinary moment. The kind I'd stopped seeing when I was too busy trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Click. Another small step toward becoming whole again. 3 months passed in a blur of endings and beginnings. I packed up my old apartment, sorting through the remnants of my life with Tyler, keeping what still felt like mine, donating what didn't, throwing away what was too painful to look at anymore. Each decision was an act of reclaiming my space, my story, my future. Emma helped me find a new place, a sun-filled loft in an old converted warehouse, with exposed brick walls and huge windows perfect for a photographer's eye. It cost more than I would have spent on my own, but Margaret Prescott had been generous with my starting salary, insisting that talent deserved proper compensation. It's perfect, Emma declared as we carried in the last box. Completely you, without any trace of them. By them, she meant my parents, Cassandra, Tyler, the family that had tried to define me for so long. She was right. This space was entirely mine, chosen without consideration for anyone else's preferences or expectations. I'd heard little from them in the intervening months. Occasional texts from my mother, growing increasingly desperate as I maintained my silence. One formal letter from my father's attorney, suggesting we discuss terms, as if my estrangement were a business negotiation that could be settled with the right financial arrangement. I'd forwarded it to James, who'd responded with appropriately legal language that essentially translated to, "Leave her alone." Cassandra had made one last attempt to contact me, showing up at my old apartment, only to find it empty, then tracking down my number through a mutual acquaintance. Her voicemail had been a masterpiece of deflection and subtle blame. "Eliza, this has gone on long enough. Everyone's suffering because of your reaction. Tyler's been passed over for 3 positions because of rumors you started. Daddy's company is struggling. Even Mother is affected. She's been uninvited from the hospital charity board. Was that really necessary? We're family. Families fight, but they don't destroy each other." I'd listened to it twice before deleting it, recognizing the manipulative tactics I'd once been susceptible to. The implied guilt, the subtle positioning of themselves as victims, the invocation of family, as if the word itself should erase all wrongs. It might have worked before. It didn't now. Today marked another milestone, my first official day at Prescott Industries. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my new bedroom, assessing the woman looking back at me. Navy blue dress, simple but elegant. Hair styled in loose waves rather than the severe bun I'd worn for years at my previous firm. A small silver camera pendant on a delicate chain, a gift from Emma to celebrate my new beginning. I barely recognized myself, not because of the external changes, but because of something deeper. My posture was different, straighter, more confident. My eyes clearer, more direct. Even my smile seemed to come from somewhere new, somewhere real. My phone chimed with a text from James. "Good luck today, you're going to be brilliant." James? Another unexpected development in my new life. We'd been seeing each other, carefully, slowly, building something that felt nothing like what I'd had with Tyler. No games, no hidden agendas, just honest conversation and gradually deepening connection. He'd been patient, understanding my need to heal before diving into anything serious. Last week, he'd finally called it what we both knew it was becoming, a relationship. The word had terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. I texted back a simple thank you with a heart emoji, a small but significant gesture of affection I was gradually becoming comfortable with again. The Prescott Industries headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming downtown tower. As I rode the elevator to the executive level, I felt a familiar flutter of nerves. Not the old anxiety of trying to prove my worth, but the healthy excitement of stepping into a new challenge. Margaret Prescott herself was waiting when the elevator doors opened. Elegant as always in a tailored suit, silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. "Eliza," she greeted me warmly. "Right on time. I appreciate punctuality." "Good morning, Mrs. Prescott," I replied, extending my hand. She shook it firmly, then surprised me by adding a brief embrace. "Margaret, please. We're colleagues now." She gave me a personal tour of the offices, introducing me to key team members, showing me the spacious corner office that would be mine, a far cry from the windowless cubicle I'd occupied at my previous firm. The walls were bare, waiting for my touch. "I took the liberty of having some of your photographs framed," Margaret said, nodding toward a stack of packages leaning against one wall. "From the portfolio you shared. I thought they'd make an excellent starting point for your office decor, but of course, the final decision is yours." I was touched by the gesture, not just the recognition of my work, but the respect for my autonomy. "Thank you, that's incredibly thoughtful." The morning passed in a whirl of introductions, orientation meetings, and paperwork. By lunchtime, I felt both overwhelmed and exhilarated. Margaret insisted on taking me to the executive dining room on the top floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. "You're making quite an impression already," she remarked as we settled at a corner table. "Harrison in marketing couldn't stop talking about your ideas for the visual rebrand." "He has a good team," I replied. "They just needed permission to think differently," Margaret nodded approvingly. "That's exactly why I wanted you here, Eliza. You see possibilities others miss." She paused, studying me over the rim of her water glass. "How are you settling into your new apartment?" "Well, thank you. It already feels more like home than anywhere I've lived before. And the other transitions? Family matters? I appreciated her delicate approach to a topic that could have been awkward. I'm finding my way, building new connections, strengthening ones that matter. Good. She signaled for the waiter to take our order, then leaned forward slightly. I should tell you that your father called my office again yesterday. 3rd time this month. My stomach tightened, despite myself. I'm sorry about that. I've made it clear I don't want contact, but... She waved away my apology. You have nothing to be sorry for. I merely wanted you to be prepared. He's becoming more insistent about arranging a meeting. Something about family reconciliation and, quote, mutually beneficial arrangements. The familiar language made me smile humorlessly. Everything's a business transaction to him. Indeed, which is why I've instructed my assistant to stop taking his calls. She fixed me with her direct gaze. Your boundaries are valid, Eliza. This company will respect them, as should everyone in your life. The simple validation brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I blinked them away quickly, but not before Margaret noticed. I've overstepped, she said quietly. No, I assured her. It's just still new to me. Having my decisions respected without having to fight for it. A sad commentary on your previous environment, but an encouraging sign for your future. She smiled warmly. Now, shall we discuss the Westridge account? I believe you had some intriguing ideas about their campaign refresh. By the end of the day, I'd settled into my new office, hung 3 of my favorite photographs on the walls, and successfully navigated my first executive strategy meeting. As I gathered my things to leave, my phone buzzed with another text from James. Dinner to celebrate your first day? That Italian place at 7? I smiled, typing back a quick agreement. The Italian restaurant had become our place, the site of our first real date, where I'd finally allowed myself to acknowledge the growing feelings between us. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, I felt a strange sense of fullness. Not happiness exactly, at least not the uncomplicated kind. It was something richer, more textured. Satisfaction, perhaps. The feeling of building something real and solid from the ground up. Outside, the early evening air was crisp with the first hint of autumn. I decided to walk part of the way home, enjoying the city's energy, the sense of being one anonymous person among many, free to define myself on my own terms. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the familiar figure standing near the corner coffee shop. Almost, but not quite. Some part of me would always recognize Tyler, no matter how much time passed. He hadn't seen me yet, was checking his watch with the impatient gesture I remembered well. My first instinct was to turn around, avoid the encounter entirely, but something stopped me, perhaps the realization that I was no longer afraid of what he might say or do, that his power over me had dissipated like morning fog in sunlight. So I continued walking, and when he finally looked up and saw me, the shock on his face was almost comical. Eliza, he said, recovering quickly, I was hoping to run into you. Were you? I kept my tone neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. Seems like an unlikely coincidence. He had the grace to look embarrassed. Not entirely coincidental. I heard you started at Prescott today. From who? I asked, though I already knew the answer. People talk. He shrugged, then gestured toward the coffee shop. Do you have a minute? I've been wanting to speak with you. I considered the request. 6 months ago, I would have agreed immediately, desperate for any explanation that might make sense of his betrayal. 3 months ago, I would have refused outright, too raw and angry for civil conversation. Now I found myself somewhere in between, curious but detached, willing to listen but not invested in the outcome. 1 cup of coffee, I agreed. I have dinner plans. He nodded, holding the door open for me with the practiced courtesy that had once seemed so charming. Inside, we found a small table near the window, away from the counter crowds. Tyler ordered for both of us, another old habit that now struck me as presumptuous rather than thoughtful. You look good, he said once our coffee arrived. Happy. I am, I replied simply. He fidgeted with his cup, uncharacteristically nervous. I've been trying to reach you. Your lawyer is formidable." "James is very good at his job," I acknowledged, a small smile playing at my lips, "which includes respecting my wishes regarding communication." Tyler's expression tightened slightly at the mention of James's name, so he knew about that development too. "Interesting. Look, Eliza," he finally said, "things have been difficult since the wedding. The Prescott deal falling through affected everyone, not just your parents. I'm aware. Cassandra's fashion line lost its primary investor. I've been passed over for every significant position in the industry. Your father's company is facing a potential hostile takeover." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "All because of what you told Margaret Prescott." "No," I corrected him gently. "All because of choices you all made. I simply shared the truth about those choices." "It was business," he insisted, echoing my father's words. "It wasn't personal." I studied him. This man I'd once believed was my future, my forever. How had I never noticed the hardness around his eyes, the calculating quality behind his charm? "It was my life, Tyler. There's nothing more personal than that." He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "What do you want then? An apology?" "Fine, I'm sorry. We handled it badly. We should have been more honest." The apology was so inadequate, so clearly transactional, that I almost laughed. "I don't want anything from you. That's the point you all seem to be missing. I'm not holding out for some grand gesture or compensation. I've moved on." "To James Harrington," he said, an edge of bitterness creeping into his voice. "Quite a strategic choice yourself." Now I did laugh. "Is that what you think? That I'm dating James to advance my career or secure my position? Not everyone operates the way you do, Tyler." "Then why him? Why so quickly?" The question caught me off guard, not because it was difficult to answer, but because it revealed so much about Tyler's own perspective. He couldn't conceive of a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine connection, because he'd never prioritized those qualities himself. "Because he sees me," I said simply. "The real me, not some version he can use or mold to fit his agenda. Because with him, I never have to perform or prove my worth." I shook my head. "But that's not really why you wanted to talk to me, is it?" Tyler's expression shifted, revealing the true purpose behind this chance encounter. "Your parents want to meet, to discuss terms for reconciliation." "Terms?" I repeated. "Of course. They're still your family, Eliza, despite everything." I took a sip of my coffee, considering his words. "Family is more than blood, Tyler. It's actions, choices, the way people treat each other when it matters most." I set down my cup decisively. My parents proved they were willing to sacrifice my happiness for business advantage. Cassandra showed she valued status over sisterhood. And you demonstrated that marriage vows mean nothing compared to career opportunity. "That's harsh," he protested. "It's honest. Something you might try sometime." I glanced at my watch. "I need to go. James is waiting." "So that's it? Years of history just erased?" "Not erased," I corrected him. "Learned from. There's a difference." As I stood to leave, Tyler caught my wrist. Not roughly, but with an entitled familiarity that made me stiffen. "Wait. Just tell me what to say to them. What would make this right?" I gently but firmly removed his hand. "Nothing makes it right, Tyler. Some things can't be fixed with the right words or enough money. Some betrayals change the relationship permanently." I met his gaze directly. "Tell them I'm happy. Tell them I'm building a life they have no place in. Tell them to respect my decision, or the next time they hear from me will be through legal channels." Outside the coffee shop, I took a deep breath of the evening air, feeling oddly lighter. The encounter with Tyler hadn't shaken me as I might have feared. Instead, it had confirmed how far I'd come, how much stronger I'd grown. I arrived at the restaurant to find James already waiting, a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket at the table. "Sorry I'm late," I said, leaning down to kiss his cheek before taking my seat. "Worth the wait," he replied with a warm smile. "How was the first day?" "Challenging, exciting, exactly what I needed." I hesitated, then added, I ran into Tyler on my way here. James's expression remained calm, though I caught the slight tensing of his shoulders. How was that? Surprisingly okay, I admitted. He was trying to broker a meeting with my parents. Some kind of reconciliation that would undoubtedly involve restoring business connections more than actual relationships. And what did you tell him? That I've moved on, that some betrayals permanently changed the relationship. I reached across the table to take James's hand. That I'm happy. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. Gradual, warm, illuminating. Are you happy? I'm getting there, I answered honestly. Every day, a little more. He poured champagne for both of us, then raised his glass. To new beginnings, and to you, Eliza, the strongest person I know. To beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. Over dinner, I told James about my day at Prescott Industries, the challenges I'd identified, the connections I'd made, the projects I was excited to tackle. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, offering insights without attempting to direct or override my thinking. Margaret invited us to her annual charity gala next month, I mentioned as we shared a tiramisu. As her guests, not just attendees. Apparently, it's quite the honor. I'd be delighted to accompany you, James replied, though I should warn you, my dancing is questionable at best. Mine too, I laughed. We can look ridiculous together. His expression grew more serious. Together? I like the sound of that. The word hung between us, rich with meaning and possibility. Together. Not as a merger of assets or a strategic alliance, but as two whole people, choosing each other day by day. After dinner, James walked me home, our hands linked comfortably as we strolled through the quiet streets. At my door, his kiss was gentle but full of promise. Not pushing for more, but clearly open to whatever might develop between us in its own time. Lunch tomorrow? He asked as we reluctantly parted. I'd like that, I replied. Text me when you're free. Inside my apartment, I moved through my evening routine with a sense of peaceful contentment, removing makeup, changing into comfortable clothes, brewing a cup of herbal tea. Simple actions that belonged entirely to me, uninfluenced by anyone else's expectations. I settled on my window seat with my tea and my camera, scrolling through the day's images. Candid shots of my new workplace, interesting architectural details in the building, a striking composition of light and shadow in the executive dining room. Tomorrow, I would select the best ones to print and frame, continuing to make my new office space as personally meaningful as my apartment had become. My phone chimed with a text. Emma this time. How was day one of the new era? Still on for Sunday dinner with the crew? I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. Emma's friends had become mine too over the past months. A diverse group of artists, writers, musicians, and free spirits who accepted me without question or judgment. Sunday dinners at the Ethiopian restaurant had become a weekly highlight, a chosen family gathering that felt more genuine than any formal event at my parents' house ever had. As I set down my phone, my gaze fell on the camera pendant Emma had given me, the small silver symbol of my reclaimed passion. I touched it reflectively, thinking about the winding path that had led me here. The devastating wedding revelation that had seemed like an ending, but had actually been the beginning of something far more authentic. If someone had told me 6 months ago that I would lose my husband's sister and parents but find myself, I wouldn't have believed them. I would have clung desperately to the familiar, no matter how toxic, rather than risk the unknown. Now, the unknown felt like opportunity rather than threat. The blank canvas exciting rather than intimidating. My phone chimed again. An email notification from Margaret Prescott, sent well after business hours. Eliza, excellent first day. Your perspective on the Westridge campaign shifted the entire conversation in a productive direction. I've received 3 messages already from team members impressed by your approach. This confirms what I already knew. You belong here, making your unique contribution. Looking forward to seeing what you accomplish tomorrow. Margaret? The simple validation brought a smile to my face. Not because I needed external approval to feel worthy, I was learning to provide that for myself, but because it reflected a truth I was finally beginning to accept. I did have unique value to offer. My perspective mattered. My voice deserved to be heard. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.